الشي شيخ ستيني تشتكت يوهان يكيايا يا يدت كليت كي وشوخوا خوان خستين خكوت لخوان كليت كي قدليتا كوستان كليت كيتس خسكوت تاقت كوها ياغ أك خوان آني كك أداتوي يتخوتان وشوخوا خوان تكتوي تاق أإتخ يأوخوا أخ أيانخ لنقت تكشتين كخويخ قاقش قهقو أدريختو يكي هختواسقو وآن كخ أي أتخقو دي تكشتين قاقش قهقو كخويخ خويني قوش يا الشيطي آيتسو أقاقق وشي كش أقاقن خشيج أختواسقو خوا أقاقق وشي أخ هخوني يا أدكيكا يا جيست قطاق قوش تاقتي خيقا يقنهيني هؤيك يقنه يوهي يوشنجد قستي تشتكت يخو أتلتشوكو أيا قاقو إيخي وقوئيك أيا يدوساق ووش كنخو تدعاتي يا ها قستي دات يأويخو أخو جاكو هلتس تليخ أقو إيخ قوستيين شوت خني قوئيخ وش هسول وش ودو شاي شوت خني قوئيخ قوش ويش شدك يازكو شادك وستي دشوخوا دسنيغو قا خو دخ أوي يوتين تشاش هتيغ أقا قوش تلتاسا أوخا تسناقو قاين أقا إتخ قا خو ديوك وقود أقا شبوت تلاك واسا دوساق دو خيخند أتخايق وإيخ يوهيخ أقا قاين كاونيك قا قوش أداتوي يوخ ʼatudli.átk دات يخسا وشوت خوستي قاو أقا خا أختو سكو قوئيخ يوهيخن قا قوش خاسا قوئيخ يا يدا جسليقا خوستي أخو آوي يس كونتيني هخو تسوكو وآتي قنيها قاين يس ياو سقاين تلش تكتاو تلش خدخ أتايا capitalist سو تلش هاستو توا وشكوين كوئيخ وانخ سويل تكت آي قا GDT تلش يخوتي anti-capitalist آي يأوخ وأخ وش 1997 قشكيوي Duluth, Minnesota أخيخت وتين وصدو ساق توق إيدلي يدو ساقو أت تلقاق إنخ television يأوه just public TV يدو ساقو أت خطق أخوني سبوتولتين أقا خوستين سأت يهاي أدايتي أسقواني ييست ومينيسوتا ييست خوستين قاق ويغتان خونيخو أخ Northwest Coast قوئيخ أيا يوهيخ شيدهيني وشخو تاس ودعاتي فتقوا يوكي أقا أوي تلين أتخاق غيدي هساتير ها تكتاستو آي هسو جيتاس أودي يا قنخ كلش أشكي أوي يا anti-capitalist ستي قاقوش دايي انقاو آي this is a message from the church of blah blah قان أختو ودين وانخ سوي Keslus ke has you katangi hatat. ʼatudli.átk ke has wuatin. Ya ʼatudli.átk kone ya wahihi. Kijk nach sati has du ai. Weta lukach adi. Aka awe konachawe adaye has du mone. Adusa ke ʼatudli.átk. Adusa gan kasekli has du jide ʼatudli. Dasa ʼatudus I. Dasa kajide ʼatudli. Kundana sa atina khayat. Ako itlal dana. Gwash we ʼatudli.átk on kanins atxati at hastituasagu udus ku. Gwash nahin. Kega nahin. Kawakshi ke hasawa ach. Ushta hasawa khash. Altakat kai. Tajid hasawa ach. Jego gengia. Gwash tina. Yagi tina. Wetatsu. Kauduwa khash. Akajide hasati. Ya yidat ko adana. Tlein dana. Misik akade. Dech at yawahi yuch. We shukwa atcha. We shukwa we kach. Kach hidu asagot. Kach de shi. We adusa has to ʼatudli.átk. Gwash dagun kach de shi. Gwash just tleik. Dagun sa ko has awashi. Has to connect kanai. Has to ayag. Ke has ke kwashi. Ke has ak kwashi. Like ke has at ke kwashi. Aka awe chakunsa we host. Nechasiku asadu asagot. Hu ach haku'iki. Gekach inach our guests. Haku'iki ayayak. Ku'iki do asag yat. Cha adusa ye jene we ku'ik kach. Kahasu ayich sati we ku'ik. Chakunsa kach de shi has awashi. We has to connect kanai kesh ayanach. What to shugu, okay? What akin helwasa. What just take what you katang tinsu. What to saku achu awe nach sati What kutas awe grik hasu kach de shi. Aka awe kach Tlein at yawahi kesh lekatat kunach dak kakwanik. Ye awe ko we atcha, we shukwa atcha. A shukat away hatuasagu, we dech we nakani you do a sago at adusa, you eat with the shi Achawe yakuiki ya ekonate kanai, kesh ayahuti, kan kakib, has shuki jayi, like achawe has jigachtu ke, which ak nachsati Aka Chadasa has to asagu yes yawakai. She'll cut Ja Hakitsa ach Chushugu nachsati it was out. Ya has ko awin nakani with sick. The cut that way at ha aka gwashwan kanins punch akayeti has to kade hanak huguti Chadusa has to asagu that you has to you has to ati has to sai Gwash Chadasa to sai just ka Bob Hede Jill Hede Klinket sai Aka away Gwash Tlein sa ko away kaki Yadu aka Hede Gwash kan kasiki wait until you do a sock with sick a 2 yeti ka'u adi katkatse chaguta side so kotseti gift ya echu cha do sa khnakhwe yesakhan to chite kakki sa in wikan kasiki. Kwashkan kasiki eoka. Qayide. Yisatin. Gushtahin qayide. Wait, that's one canins. Tlein. Tlein. Shitsini Tlein. Atuyeti. Kag anges. Took the kaku kag. Chakagu. Akayeti. Wait the koa. Gushtahin qayide kadu kwakotin. Kwakotin. Hade. Konehas a kawa gwash when the dark. Yeah, the katas a kawa achasawa shagan. Acho agwash kudachlitzin ten, hosatin, kata yes aya has to jaka. Achadi. Sheh hosatin one. Yeawa, yake at which I way achiratami. Took a artlin akutsati. Yituagasagu yriwatani, way ǩu. Chadakasa ǩu tasha just ǩu kada. Look.
Say, that's it is a fireball.
And Katsiki.
Akish an Kanach Asakod. We look nach Hadi Saye.
One Colinzi Ach, de handed Sak. Achadi. Okay. ʼatudli.átk.
That's what's the ʼku raise hand. Where ʻatkai ʻkéʻéexʼ chat ka gach salad ka kat ʻatkai ʻkéʻéexʼ delicious.
Okay. Jeez. Quashwe ʼu nasketihin qaqede kakiti. Qanuks qa atkhaqisani. Qatl qa. Chagudach sai yata. Yiqaquz dasawit like qaqinach. Chaq kiji tu echi. Chaq kiji tu echi.
Cheese.
Dasawit like qaqinach. Chaq.
Wait, eagle wing in oil?
That's the way it's called.
And it's
Isiku chaklu was a ʼatudli seko chaklu yacheti. Yacheti ko was has to eich. That's the way to ha. Yacheti and yacheti. One means was two yacheti ko. Was qatl a Jew. Akaye is a name. Baicha. Like shkalneek kak.
water.
Butter. Chak to it. Chak kiji to echi. Ka yatatsu. Chak chagu. Chak chagu. Kalkeka chak chagu. Just aside. Wait the ayatsu. Utuacha. Dak kits eight shukwa. Akakicha. One qanins kuch crispies a kuch.
Right.
Gosh. Smoothie ʼatudli too. Okay.
Wait, banana? Keishi ye awaka. Keishi to say way on that kind of hick at high.
Ah.
Fine.
And what is the ʼatudli.átk?
The monkey.
Yeah, why is it called ʼatudli.átk? For this, okay, so here's three things that have that kind of name. ʼatudli.átk, which is a monkey. What's anda una? What is that in English? Anda una.
Land gun? Land
Okay.
rifle?
It's a llingit
Howitzer.
anushi wushas kugur gawan wanqanins. Anushi ko anda una astujibu.
Is it a cannon?
It's a cannon.
Cannon?
Okay, a Russian gun.
And what about andayagu? Andayagu. Andayagu.
Is it a car?
Anushi yak Tlein daye wutien. Has kautli ya. A yikdewe hasawacha.
Oh, it's a robot.
Rowboat?
Robo.
Bro.
All three of those things have the same thing at the front of them. On da. Why?
From land.
What if it's not land? Because, okay, I would say
Is it-
Tlein?
yes. So, first of all, I would say there's a few words in Tlingit that have like multiple definitions, but kind of one main one. And for on, I would say, because if I say ande gachtu at, or say ach ani de nagu, I'm usually not saying that could be interpreted as come to my land, but I would interpret that as come to my town, come to my
Yeah.
village.
Around town.
So yeah, village is sort of my primary translation. If you want to say land, you'd say kat. But when Tlingit saw how big these boats were, they would call it like a village. It's like a whole village. So they called it on. That's the old name for these yaktlen. And so on da around it. So you have the rifles around it. You have the boats around it. And you have this hyperactive thing around it. So the first time they saw a monkey must have been on one of those big boats on it. And that's why it's called on that kind of hick. It's like hyper around the big boat. So
What is kanahik? That's what.
hyper somehow.
So, like I thought, she had said to me one time that they're called that because they kind of move like they don't move straight, eh? But I'm not sure. I could never figure out how to take it apart, eh? Like they kind of walk like this or so, like that. But
Yeah, I think I have it as I can't remember where exactly I got this. So when I have entries in the dictionary, I try to like pull them apart. And this has changed over the years, just in terms of like kind of how I do this. But one of the goals there is to allow people to see kind of how the word is put together. So you have on, dot, and then plus, ka, na, and then hick. And so, I don't know. That's a good question. Because I think it's also kind of something that's kind of scary for Tlingit people. Qun.
I know back in like the Age of Sail, I think it was a British term to call like the boys who delivered gunpowder to guns around ships, gunpowder monkeys or something like that.
Huh.
So
Really?
yeah,
Oh,
I
okay.
wonder if it comes from that in some way. I don't know.
That's possible. So we also have this, the Lear verb notes are really good to sort of explore. They got so much stuff in them. So we'll go down to see if there's, but I think the only hika in there is to be full or to fill something. Okay, I thought I saw it, so I'll see if I could find it somewhere. I'll monkey around and see if I could find it somewhere. Any language questions before we get into our wonderful ELAN project?
The onward, it reminded me of a question I had a long time ago. There's like ʼatudli.átk, like the marker, the thing you marker with or whatever. And then also she uses that similar, I can't remember exactly what it was, but for a camera to like take a picture, it starts with ʼat, and then I think tape or something.
Yeah, okay. So
what is that on? What is that?
That's a good question. So if we go to the dictionary and we'll go to the Tlingit section and we'll just go to the double A's. And then when we scroll down a little bit, we'll get down to, so first of all, you have on, which there is an on, which is a village, which we just talked about. But there's a second on, which is a contraction of in. So you can contract. So when we look at these, couple things is we have this thing called the empty base. Just to review, or if you've never heard of it, it's the thing that exists so you can put a suffix onto a pronoun. So a pronoun, like pronouns and names, you cannot put suffixes on them. And I think English, well, I don't know, English doesn't really use suffixes the way that Tlingit does. But if you want to say day or dach or nach or nuk, well, nuk isn't actually a suffix, but the other ones are. You can't say ach day, or you can't say ḳune day. I guess if you're being silly, you can, but like the grammar of Tlingit really doesn't allow you to do that. And so you have this little E sound that just pops up. It doesn't mean anything. It's just there so you could put a suffix on it. So you could say ach ide, ach idach, do eat. And so we learn how to use these because we learn a bunch of verbs that have them. Do ʼskhalneek, ach eat idishi. And so we just sort of see it. And so, but some of them can contract. So you can say ach in, or you could say khan. You could say ach eat, or you could say chat. You could say, and the other ones that contract, you could say doin or dune, but I've never heard anybody say dune in that way. But you could say in or on, and on pops up all the time. So it's the thing you do the verb with. So this could be used with any type of verb. So I could say, we kuchida an kach shechit ach kuchu. That pencil is the one I wrote my book with, right? Or whatever the thing is. And so you could say, teen, shak kwachich. I'm going to club him in the head with this book, right? So you could say teen. If you're using the thing, if you're naming the thing, you could say teen. Yagucha teen. I'm going to walk out with this cup. But you could say on for with it. So with it, and then if we just look at some examples, we got a whole bunch of different ons, I guess. I say I got 4 and 5. Okay, I'll look at that later. There shouldn't be a 4 and a 5. But then we start getting into verbs. And so we see this pattern of on, something, at. So the pattern that we have here, with it, do it, some kind of verb, thing. So in this case, on the usku at, something that things wash itself with, right? So the at is the something part. The on is the with it. And so with it, people sew thing. So now you got a sewing machine. On dus kirti at, with it, people gaff hook. They hook things with it. With it, people pulverize things with it. People scrape with it. This one is going back to village, or, it's a big word. On gashakhu is a big word. It's like a flood. On this one is also village. On ʼatudli.átk. So here's another variation of the gaffing. On ʼatudli.átk. And so this is when we learn these patterns too, sometimes we can make new words for things, because we're going to have some different things that we need words for. On ʼatudli.átk. So this is having multiple things stacking up, and this is how you create big long words in Tlingit. But someone asked us to create words for curriculum. So then you get a long pattern. With it, two people teach. I got to strike that U that needs to not be there. Thing. And then ḳu'éexʼ is like a plan, or it's a plan, or a directive, I guess. So the on is with it. And then you'll see a bunch of nouns that have it. Little things to sell. On ḳu'éexʼ. I got that one from Dastia, Ethel McKinnon. She was so fun. And so on ḳu'éexʼ, with it, a thing to plane things. And so some of them end up being village, like on ḳanagu is probably medicine on the land. But a lot of these are with it. So that's what that means. Any other questions?
I had one about pronouns. When we were doing pronouns, I was waiting for dach. I don't know if it's underlying X, but I thought it was plural non-human.
Yeah, okay, let's talk about that one. So if we go down to the objects section in this book, this pronoun, so this one that we've been taught, so this one that was brought up here, let's see. So it's right here. So because it does pop up in the preverb, so it's very similar to hus in that it's kind of out in front of the verb, but it does have a form that can be attached to the verb, which is daqa. So dach is sometimes used for non-human things, but I think it's mostly used for saying these things all do that thing, but maybe in separate locations or separate times. So for example, if there's a lake and there's houses around the lake, but they're in different locations, yach daqati hit. The houses are around the lake. And so that it is one, it's not super common, but I think it's good to use, because you can end up having, because when we learn about like motion verbs, we'll learn that when you pluralize a motion verb, so when more than one thing is moving, the verb usually changes. But this is one instance where they might not. So for example, I could say, Nechte haskluwaguk. They all ran home. But if they ran to different homes, I could say, Nechte dachwutchachich. And so that's still a plural, but they're not all running as a pack back to the house, not running together. They're running separate. So we got a pronoun for that. I think they've just been really into making new words. Like, oh, we better make a word for that.
Yeah, ḳu'éexʼ, like to me the daga is that distributive, but especially inland, I think you'll hear dach, and it doesn't have to be distributed. It can just be a plural. So I don't know if things are different probably are different on the coast.
Yeah, I think that word is much more common in the interior. That's where I first started hearing it. But then when I look at old trinket stories, it pops up in there. So I think it's something that has when you have language loss, you have things that slide, and you got to sort of decide what to hold on to. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Kane, I had one other question for you, just quickly. If I want to say it's about Yanach, if I want to say my kids are better than your kids, or my kids have more than your kids, how does whose kids go first, I guess, in that construction is what I'm
Well,
asking.
mine do. No, I was kidding.
Mm.
This is a good question. So we write these kind of like this, so Yanach, or we'll say pin. And so it's always been like it's been a bit of a mystery on how to write this stuff. So dictionaries published in the 70s would have this, a Yanach. But what I found is people will keep the on there, right? So they would do the same thing with like a walk. But then someone would say, do a walk. And so you could teach that that's the thing that can be substituted. But what we're trying to sort of transition to is like when you see this line, you know it needs to belong to something. And so if you wanted to say, so this is, what is Yanach again?
Beyond, path.
Well, there's a different Yanach, which means to go past something. This is a different Yanach.
More.
And kin,
Is that the less than?
yes. So we have more and less, right? And what they are more or less than these always relate to the noun right before it. So you could say, ach, yanach would be more than me. Ach, kin, less than me. And so it kind of depends on what we're talking about, right? And so when I first started thinking about this word, we were in the Shakespeare play, and someone said something like, Dishu yayaki yechwachi. Or no, Dishu yayaki, something like that. It's a half moon today. And someone said, Yechwachi akin away. I think it's less than that. So they were saying, I think the moon is less than half of a moon. So they're saying it's like a crescent moon. So we often hear these as a yanach or a kin, because they are referring to this third non-human sort of thing, right? So now we start getting into comparisons. So it seems like if you're saying like, you might say, ach, yanach ausaku, you fadangi. They know more language than me. And so here the verb is sort of refers really sort of linked to ausaku. This is what they know. But when we start getting into more of something than someone, which is tricky business, I think you end up with achkayanach yake. Or I might say achkayanach yake, which would be you're better than me. Or if we want to not make it so dramatic, you could say ach pin itlage. You're smaller than me. So then ach kin, yeah. Well, let's just say kayana. But it's interesting, like, so kin, and because I think you can say ach yanach. And so here's another dissertation for someone, right? Is when does it become kayanach? Because once we started comparing things, the speakers that I was working with, they would switch it to kayanach. If you're saying, you are more of this verb than me, or whatever, when it's getting to like that, so you could say, ach yetki, Or I guess if I were to say that, I would say this is not a nice phrase. ʻatudli.átk. Well, I guess no, I would go ʻatudli ʻátk. That's how I would sort of construct that. But then I would shame myself as soon as I say it. Some people talk that way, and some of them do it in public. I guess the other thing that I was thinking of is, okay, let's think of non-human things. How do I say it is big?
You're gay.
You're gay. It is big. Can also mean it is plentiful. It's kind of tricky. How do I say it's very big?
Ach, you're gay.
How do I say it's the biggest? It sounds like the same person saying this thing is probably gonna say this. Okay, sorry. Go ahead. So ʻklach is this, okay, so it is really very big. You can go one higher than this.
It's the biggest, huh?
Mm-hmm.
You're gay. You're gay.
And this gets us to, I think it's kind of like the biggest. And then you could also say, what about it's too big?
You're gay.
So now we get it's big. Okay. So what about small?
Kink.
It's really small.
Kunach ye kukeng.
So we can actually, and then we could say tlachonach yekugenk, tlachayanach yekugenk. So it could follow all these patterns, except for this one. You won't say, for it's too small, you would not say pudach yekugenk.
It's kut ugenk. Kut ugenk, is it? For a human, eh? Kut kusigenk.
Well, it's
Or for a living animal.
okay. Well, we'll copy and paste this and we'll change them all to humans. Okay, so we'll copy and paste these two. And so here we can go and we'll just substitute that and that. Okay, it's getting a little long, but we need a different verb. There's a verb for something being too small. Do we know? So Tlinga always has it's always got like little tricks up its sleeve. It's such a fun language. And so what gets really fun, I think, is then I could take all of these and say, oh, well, this is a plus I classifier of a 0. We change that to an L classifier. Now it's a living thing, every one of these. But then these would all end up being big. And they, or like it. So it's a living thing now. And same with here. But this one's going to do it a little bit differently. So you're going to say, anybody know how it changes? Oh my goodness, there's an underlined G that shouldn't be there. So this changes to an L classifier. This one doesn't, but it changes to a different one. What do you think? There's a 0 classifier right there.
Sucking.
And then kusaka. They're too small. They can't go on the roller coaster. Okay. Sorry.
Is kuska limited to, I mean, like kudak and kunak we can use for all sorts of things, but kuska, does that have just application to in this case?
Just for something being too small.
Okay, goodness sheesh.
Well, as far as I know, it's the only one, but it switches to its own verb. And that's also, I think, a Tequedi name, Kuska. I know someone named that. They're not very tall. Okay. Okay, good cheese.
Would you say then, like, it's like really too small? Like, if, you know, one of us were trying to put on like child's shoes.
Uh-huh.
Would you...
Well, I was thinking of this, yeah, because we were. Shukach Adi have a shirt that I think must have belonged to a slender person, but it's called like the big man. They call it the big man shirt for some reason. I'm like, is it the irony thing? Because we don't really have sarcasm and thing yet. Like you can't really do sarcasm and not even in the language. Like, okay, like you know, there's a certain tone and you just can't do it and thing. But yeah, and so as someone would have guessed, you'd say, "Kudach yegugink." But then it's like, oh, well, there's a different. It switches to a different verb, but it's like there's just always so much to. Oh yes, and then I want to address the. Okay. A question I missed in the chat. Before we move on. So these would be ach. And what this comes down to is for Tlingit, the way it deals with what we call relational nouns, which also include all these directional terms, is in English, you would say above me, right? So this seems to me to take on what is an object, looks like an object pronoun in English to me, right? Because you'd say they kissed, right? So that me is the one receiving the verb. But if you look at how would we say this in Tlingit? What's a good test? Above me.
Diki?
Well, diki just means up above, but it doesn't mean above anything. It just means way up high. So technically, yes, but
is it ʼatudli.átk?
It sure is. So kina is up above. So now but technically you're saying my above. That's how Tlingit takes care of these. And it's going to create a bit of, I think your English brain is going to be like, no, that's not how we do those things. But it's okay because languages just work different. So you say my around, my above, our, you know, so this stuff gets kind of crazy. If you say like, how would I say it snowed on us?
ʼatudli.átk.
And so literally you get our on snow it precipitated, right? And so just like literally looking at how the language works is helpful because then you could start to remember those patterns. So then because that's why I think it gets confusing when you want to say, where does the yanach go? It goes right after the thing that it is more than. which, you gotta be careful with, you gotta know this stuff, right? Because you could, whose fish was bigger? Ach yanach shage. Ichati. When? Okay, those are good questions. Sorry, I just feel like making dumb jokes today because I'm tired and because I've been through a lot. Okay. How's the ELAN stuff going? How fun to be working in ELAN.
I actually did it. I got to 30 seconds.
Champion.
I think I was able to just transcribe 30 seconds, but not translate it.
It's a big step. We're taking big steps now. And so starting to loosen the training wheels a little bit. How fun. What an exciting time.
I was able to transcribe it, but then I went back and tried to translate, and either a lot of the words that I transcribed are not in the dictionary, or I did not transcribe them accurately. And I'm guessing it's probably the second one.
Well, luckily, we all work together. So whenever you're doing this work, I just highly encourage you to just go easy on yourself, stay positive. Like these things, they do take time. And so I want to talk a little bit about well, I guess I got to share my screen a different way. Let me try it this way. Okay. Oh, can you guys see everything on my screen now? Okay. So when you're working in this program, this is what we call segmentation mode. I like to open a recording, listen to the whole thing, and these little things are called segments, where you're going to put the words. Then I'll usually switch under options. Transcription mode is pretty fun, but you have to select your font size, which I'm going to set to 24. So maybe it's big enough for us to see. Okay. Number of columns, I want 2. Do you guys see this pop-up window? And then
I didn't see how you got there though.
Okay. So under options.
Options, okay.
Transcription mode. And I'm going to actually go back to, when you first open it, this is the sort of mode that you're in. It's called annotation mode, which I work in this mode quite a bit. It's probably actually the one I do most of, just because too lazy to switch modes.
Oh, annotation mode.
But when you open the program, you are in what's called annotation mode.
No, what's that?
I like to go under options. I like to go to segmentation mode. And this one, you can hit the space bar to play the recording. And then you can push enter to start one of these segments. Enter again to end it. So this is how you can create all your segments. Okay. I think it's helpful to listen to the whole thing. And then you're just sitting there hinting the enter button, but you're also listening to the whole language. But I don't really like to work in this mode. So once I'm done with this, and I did this whole thing, so, hit the space bar, and it plays, maybe it does. I'll set that button. And it plays and hit enter, and it opens and hit enter and it closes. So that's like how you create these little things. And then and if you miss, you can grab the ends and drag it. You can move the whole thing, and you can right click and you can delete. So this is a pretty handy way to get your file. You get yourself set up to kind of do this work. And when you do this work, sometimes it's one-on-one with the speaker. But sometimes I would set this up. I would have George and Marge on the other side of the table. We'd each have microphones in front of us. We'd each have headphones. I'd have the music. I'd have the audio from this going into the headphones and the audio from the microphone going into the headphones, because they were both in their 90s and you had to talk kind of loud to talk to them. But when you had the microphone there, then we could all talk to each other and listen to the thing at the same time. It's very fun. If we go into annotation mode, and if this is where you work, you do want to do, I think, a couple of things. So if I think I said, I also didn't share my audio with you. So if I go in here and I say, oops. So I can go in here and I'll do this one for us. Now I'm sharing my screen and I'm also sharing very tiny, tiny, tiny font. So I'm gonna make this bigger so I could see it and so that you all could see it. So if I right click on this segment, I can select font size and I'm gonna set that thing to 24.
Okay.
But now, so that sets the font size, which I guess you could think of as like, how tall is this thing? Now that I made it tall enough, maybe I want to go bigger. So let's even go one size up. What does 36 look like? Maybe that's easier for my eyes. But now I can't see the rest of the words. So the second thing to fix is the zoom. So the zoom is how does it go this way? So if I set this to 200%, I can almost see it all. I got to go bigger. So now I'm going to right click again, zoom, go 300%. That looks pretty good to me. So now I can see this whole thing. It's big enough. I can also, so here I can control the volume of these recordings. I can record the speed that it's talking to. But I can also go to here under grid and select ḳlingi. And now I could see every sentence that's in this recording as I write them. I like to do that. Or I'll just set it under text and I can see it as it, so you can see it all laid out like this. And this shows you all of your segments, every single one. So it's very handy once you, but there's a lot to this thing. That means there's a lot to figure out. So and now we get to the translation part. And this is where it's sort of like you just learn how, it's like if we sat around for 2 years, talked about how to play baseball. And I told you all kinds of stuff, everything I knew. And then you just walked out on the field and someone's throwing pitches at 90 miles an hour. It's like, it's a different thing to engage. How do we translate this? And do you have any questions about what it is? We have a verb and then we have the noun that the verb is talking about.
The green light is on.
The light is green.
The light is green, yeah.
So some people you can add more tiers to this if you want to, as you do this work later, because you might have sort of you might have the thing and then you might have the literal, because you could also do something like this. You could say, Jade like to be that light. So you might end up with something like that as you're sort of going through and just figuring out one word at a time. But then so if you go under tier, you can add. So these are called segments. That's where you write the words. On this left-hand side, these are called tiers. So you have one tier for ḳlingi, one for the translation. I might actually go in and say, maybe I want another tier that says, and I'm going to say this is English. There's a lot to setting all these tiers up. What I'll put on our class website, I think I have it, I don't know. But I'll put it on tonight, is this template that was developed by ʼatudli.átk Mallory Story. Because you do have to set up some things, which we're not going to do today. But the big thing is you can set up a parent tier. And what that means, and it's important to do it this way, because when I do it this way, if I double click here, it's automatically the same length as the one above it. And if I say, well, I need to make this longer, all three of those things just got long. If you don't have a parent tier, there'll be different lengths, and that can create a headache. So you could have a third one where you could say the light is green. So you can sort of say, well, this is the word for word sort of translation. And now this is how I'm going to sort of redo it for my English brain. It kind of depends on what your final output is too, how you end up doing this work. Any questions so far?
I couldn't figure out how to get those translation layers on. All I could do was listen to it and then make my own notes.
Okay, so like getting these segments, Bill?
No, because I didn't even try and do segments. Just to get a whole nother line there to actually write stuff down in the way it sounded.
Well, let's say we
Were
start.
those tiers?
So if we start at this line and there's nothing here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this. So I'm clicking and dragging.
Yeah.
I'll hit this play button. I'll turn on this selection mode. That means it should start at the beginning of what I've selected and stop at the end. So this is a little button that I push right here. And oops, there it goes. Why is it doing that?
ʼatudli.átk again. ʼatudli.átk again.
So as I listen to it, I might say, oh, this is a little click of like some kind of machinery or something that's not him talking. So maybe I want to go from right here.
ʼatudli.átk again.
Now I can right click and select new annotation here. And that will put an annotation there. And now I can type in it.
Well, I couldn't figure out how to get those annotation rows there. How do
I
you?
think I had that same problem. I was trying to do new, and then I got smart enough to just open the template that ḵu.éexʼ sent us, and it was all there. And I said, okay, I'm just going to use this.
Yeah, so I built an ELAN file for you. And if you open, it's a EAF file. If you open that one, it's all ready to go.
Oh,
I don't know if all the segments were there. I don't think so. I left that part.
Not all of them,
Yeah.
but a good chunk of them.
But the tiers, there are 2 tiers already there.
oh, okay. I guess I didn't do that right yet.
Maybe we don't have enough time, but on Wednesday, I'll show you how to build an ELAN file. Like from scratch, because maybe you want to do this from scratch.
No.
Right? I think I did it for you. I think I showed you on Wednesday, but then I also said it's there. So just open the ELAN file that's there. It won't affect the one that's in my Google Drive. Like you download it, and then you can do whatever you want with it. You're the only one who's going to see it.
ʼatudli.átk again.
What is that? How many? Okay, how many words? And now what are they?
Do walk.
Is that it?
Che. Google.
Check.
ʼatudli.átk again.
Che. Kadain.
Is it ʼatudli.átk?
ʼatudli.átk again.
Wooch. Wooch.
I heard do acht.
ʼatudli.átk again.
Well, Kadain is at the end.
ʼatudli.átk again.
I think it's that.
ʼatudli.átk again.
So this shows you that there's a yes or no question.
ʼatudli.átk again.
And so when you're doing this work too, there's this thing called a false start. Everybody does in every language spoken in the world. Everybody has false starts. And so that means you sort of start talking and then you sort of restart for yourself. People do it in every single language, right? So they'll be like, I want to go over there, that's fine. It's a speech act, right? So sometimes people just need to reset it in their brain and start over. So when he says do, ʼatudli.átk again.
ʼatudli.átk again.
So usually as we go through and we start to figure out what the thing is, we might have had so we might have had it on there twice. Then as you go back, you say, okay, I can probably get rid of one. Now what?
How do you get ge from, I heard G, not ge.
ʼatudli.átk again. ʼatudli.átk again.
I hear ge, but it could be a ge. Anybody else?
But inland, it might be gi as well.
Right.
ʼatudli.átk again.
Yeah, it probably is ge. In Tlein, it will probably always be ge as opposed to ge. ʼatudli.átk again. Which is interesting because like the question's pulling the tone down a little bit, which is interesting. What is this saying?
Kedin.
ʼatudli.átk is a really interesting verb for me.
Is it like can people hear it well, or like can it be heard?
Yeah, that's what I would say. That's how I would translate this. So again, we can sort of move this down to the English line if we want to, and we say people can hear it. Yes, no, question mark. Well, right. And so you can't, if you want to do it that way, just to sort of think about word order, you could also say ʼatudli.átk. ʼatudli.átk. I think you have three options for how you could say this. And that, we had talked before last year about this. In Hawaiian, they teach things with what they call he and what we call na. So they use an octopus as like a grammar tool to say like each of these is na. You can move it, but they have to stay together. So ʼatudli.átk can move, ge can move, ʼatudli can move. Most commonly, ʼatudli pops up before the verb. But, you say ʼatudli nata. You say nata ʼatudli, but I think it's pushing the language to do something it doesn't naturally. Okay. So ʼatudli.átk is really interesting to me. We'll come back to this, but so if I said, thinking of this verb, we might hear it like this. ʼatudli.átk.
Can you hear me?
I heard a raven.
So this one has like there's something really interesting here, because you could say this would be I heard a raven. But this one has this, when this CH pops on there, it has this special function in this particular verb, which means able to hear it. But then once you put the d on there, I think you end up with it can be heard. But then how could we translate this? I think you have two possible translation terms.
That can be heard.
And what does that usually do to make noise?
Mm-hmm.
Meow.
Is this how you do it? Meowing?
Uh-huh.
So if you want to say, in Tlingit, how would you say a frog is croaking?
It makes a sound.
Well, you would say ʼatudli.átk. So like in Tlingit, or like this is one where English is like, I finally win the category game, right? And so Tlingit has categories for everything, but not really for like making types of sounds. So you've got cawing and meowing and mooing, like wasus.átk. So that's why this verb is so interesting to me, is because it can also mean like is sounding off, is making a noise. But you end up with like it can be heard. And so this is one where like this verb does a lot of different work. And I don't know, it's just something interesting to think about. And so can it be heard? Is it audible? Is the sound good? Like, and so that was this little like sound check question before we got started. So on Wednesday, we'll keep going on this. We also need to start talking about, we gotta have a serious talk about verb conjugation. Tlingit verbs are complicated, but everything can be figured out. So I've been messing around with like these. Well, I'll show you on Wednesday. But the thing I want you to make sure that you've done is you've gotten to the 30-second mark on here. Keep working on look, don't worry if like feels like it's difficult and you're really having a hard time. We will work on it every phrase together up until the 30-second mark. We'll do that on Wednesday. We'll also start talking about this chapter. I want to go over this stuff, and I want to go over this stuff. And again, like you don't have to know it all now. But I do think to become a second language speaker of Tlingit who can use things in complicated ways, I think you got to have a good foundation with some of this stuff. It's scary and sneaky and tricky, but you're smart, you're really smart. So we'll talk about how this stuff works. And this chapter, and I went through and I tried to color code it all so we can sort of keep those things in mind. And I know not everybody sees colors the same ways. But we'll also talk through all of these things. And it comes down to, this is the magic of Tlingit right here. There's so much in these 4 little spots. These 4 little spots unlock every verb mode there is, which is wild. It's so wild. But like once you get it, you could just start moving these verbs into these different modes. And so as you learn a new verb, you're like, oh, cool. I can say, let's go play. You can say that. And you've got na right there. Nach. Okay. So that's why I said to my kids, wasadu sak lettuce. And they gave me all these different ideas. And I said, nach too. There's my silly grammar joke to end every Zoom in town. Any questions before we go? Or you can complain about the quality of the jokes. That's just fine.
At 2 a.m.
It means, huh?
I was saying, where was that at 2 a.m?
I know. Well, yeah, I regrettably did not do my little stand-up routine, but I was also very tired at that point. Okay. See you folks on Wednesday. I'll be zooming in, so just remember that. And
Yeah, Constantine.
Cheesh.
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 Get the blue corn muffins at that cafe.
Ooh.
Those are wonderful.
Love to.
Trying to figure out how to say he's going away from the snow, or he's running away from the snow. Late dak equal gut or something like that.
Late dak kwashi.
Late dak kwashi. Benashish. So you're Constantine.
Cheesh.
Cheesh.
Have fun.
Wow.